If you've ever gone to bed feeling like you did everything right, ate a sensible dinner, skipped the dessert, took your medication on schedule, and then woken up the next morning to check your blood sugar and found it higher than you expected, I want you to know something right away. You are not imagining it, and you are not doing anything wrong. There is one specific window of time every single evening that has an outsized effect on what your blood sugar looks like when you wake up, and almost nobody talks about it. Most of the advice out there focuses entirely on what you eat during the day. Almost nobody focuses on what happens in the 2 hours before your head hits the pillow. And that's exactly what we're digging into today, because there is one simple, completely free bedtime habit that can make a measurable difference in your overnight blood sugar, and I'm going to walk you through exactly why it works and exactly how to do it before we're done here. But I want you to stick with me through this whole video, because understanding why this works is what's going to make you actually stick with it, rather than trying it once and forgetting about it in a week. Welcome to Prime Health Insight, the channel built for adults over 60 who want real, practical answers about health, blood sugar, and healthy aging, without the confusing medical jargon and without anyone talking down to you. If that sounds like your kind of channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, before we get any further into this video, because we publish content just like this regularly, and I don't want you missing the next one. It costs you nothing, it takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this channel keep growing so we can keep making videos like this one. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into why nighttime is such a critical and honestly underappreciated piece of the blood sugar puzzle. Here's something that surprises a lot of people the first time they hear it. Your blood sugar doesn't just sit still while you sleep. Your liver is actually working through the night, quietly releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream to keep your brain and body fueled while you're not eating. This is completely normal, and it happens in everyone, diabetic or not. But as we get older, and especially for anyone managing insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, that overnight release of glucose can become a little less well-regulated. On top of that, many people naturally become somewhat more insulin resistant in the very early morning hours, a pattern often referred to by doctors as the dawn phenomenon. It's driven by a natural rise in certain hormones like cortisol and growth hormone that occurs as your body prepares to wake up, and those hormones can nudge your blood sugar upward right around the time you're still asleep. So when you check your blood sugar first thing in the morning and it's higher than you'd like, it's not necessarily about anything you did wrong that day. A huge piece of that number was decided by what happened overnight while you had zero control over it. Except that's not entirely true. Because while you can't consciously control your liver or your hormones while you're asleep, you absolutely can influence how your body handles that overnight glucose release based on what you do in the hours leading up to bedtime. Think of it like this: your evening routine sets the stage, and your body performs on that stage all night long while you're unconscious. A poorly set stage leads to a rough performance. A well-set stage leads to a smoother one. And that's really what this whole video is about. Let's talk about a few of the common evening habits that quietly work against you, because understanding what hurts makes it much clearer why the one habit we're building up to actually helps. The first is eating a large, heavy meal very close to bedtime. When you eat a big dinner right before lying down, your body has to process a large glucose load at exactly the time when your natural insulin sensitivity is already starting to decline for the night. That combination, a big glucose load plus declining insulin sensitivity plus lying still instead of moving, is close to a perfect storm for an elevated blood sugar reading the next morning. The second common issue is alcohol in the evening. Alcohol can cause an initial dip in blood sugar followed by a rebound rise later in the night, and it can also interfere with the quality of your sleep, which brings us to the third issue. Sleep quality itself has a surprisingly direct relationship with blood sugar control. When sleep is fragmented, too short, or poor quality, your body tends to produce more stress hormones like cortisol, and elevated cortisol pushes blood sugar upward. This becomes a bit of a vicious cycle for a lot of older adults because poor blood sugar control can itself disrupt sleep. You might wake up needing the bathroom more often or just generally sleep lighter, and then that poor sleep makes the next night's blood sugar control a little harder, and so on. The fourth issue, and one that's become much more relevant in the last several years, is screen time and light exposure right before bed. Bright light, especially the blue light from phones, tablets, and televisions, suppresses your body's natural production of melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate your sleep cycle. Disrupted melatonin doesn't just make it harder to fall asleep. Melatonin and glucose regulation are more connected than most people realize, and consistently poor evening light habits have been associated with worse overnight blood sugar patterns in the research on this topic. Now, here's where I want to pause and clear up a myth, because I know a lot of you have probably heard some version of a quick fix that supposedly lowers overnight blood sugar, and I want to be straight with you about which of these actually hold up. You may have heard that a spoonful of apple cider vinegar before bed will meaningfully lower your morning blood sugar. The honest answer is that the evidence for this is thin and inconsistent. Some small studies have shown a modest effect on post-meal blood sugar when vinegar is taken with a meal, but it is not a reliable overnight fix, and it's certainly not something to rely on in place of the habits that actually matter. You may have also heard that a particular herbal tea, like chamomile or cinnamon tea, will do the trick. Again, these might be pleasant, relaxing parts of an evening routine, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying them, but there simply isn't strong, consistent evidence that either one meaningfully changes your overnight blood sugar numbers. I'd rather give you something today that's actually backed by a solid, well-established mechanism in how your body works, rather than a trendy shortcut that sounds good in a headline but doesn't hold up. So let's talk about what actually does work and why. The number one bedtime habit that helps lower blood sugar overnight, especially for adults over 60, is taking a short, easy walk in the couple of hours after your evening meal, before you settle in for the night. I know on the surface, that might sound almost too simple to be the big reveal you've been waiting for this whole video. But stick with me, because the reason this works is genuinely fascinating. And once you understand the mechanism, you'll never look at your after-dinner routine the same way again. When you eat a meal, the carbohydrates in that food get broken down into glucose, which enters your bloodstream and needs to be shuttled into your cells for energy or storage. Normally, that process relies heavily on insulin to unlock your cells and let glucose in. But here's the part that most people never learn. Your muscles have a second, completely separate pathway for pulling glucose out of your bloodstream that doesn't rely on insulin at all. When your muscles contract during physical activity, even something as gentle as walking, they can pull glucose directly out of your blood to use as fuel, largely independent of how much insulin you have available or how well your insulin is working. This is enormously important for anyone dealing with insulin resistance because it means you have a completely separate door for glucose to exit your bloodstream, one that doesn't depend on the very system that's already struggling to do its job. So when you take a walk after your evening meal, you're essentially giving your body a second, insulin-independent way to clear some of that post-meal glucose out of your blood before it has a chance to sit elevated for hours while you sleep. Instead of that big glucose load lingering in your bloodstream through the evening and setting up a higher starting point for the overnight hours, a portion of it gets pulled into your muscles and used up, right when your body needs the help most. And because this effect happens on the muscular level rather than depending on your pancreas or your insulin sensitivity, it works to some degree for almost everyone, regardless of how well-controlled or poorly controlled their diabetes currently is. There's also a timing piece here that matters too. The period roughly 30 minutes to 2 hours after eating is when your blood sugar is naturally at its highest point following a meal, as the food is actively being digested and glucose is flooding into your bloodstream. Taking your walk during that window means you're intervening at exactly the moment your body needs the extra glucose disposal the most. A walk taken much later, once your blood sugar has already started coming back down on its own, simply doesn't have the same blunting effect on that post-meal peak. This is part of why the phrase bedtime habit fits so well here for most people over 60. Dinner happens in the early evening, which puts that ideal walking window somewhere in the couple of hours before you're winding down for bed anyway. It fits naturally into an evening routine rather than requiring you to carve out extra time somewhere else in your day. Let me paint a picture of what this might actually look like for someone who's never tried it, because I think it helps to imagine the real, ordinary version of this rather than some idealized fitness routine. Picture finishing dinner around 6 or 6:30 in the evening, the way a lot of people do. Instead of heading straight to the recliner and turning on the television the moment the dishes are cleared, you put on a light jacket if it's cool out, step outside, and walk a slow, comfortable loop around your block, or maybe just up and down your driveway a few times if that's more manageable. It doesn't need to feel like exercise in the way we usually think of that word. It can feel more like a chance to notice the evening light changing, get a little fresh air, maybe wave to a neighbor watering their garden. 15 minutes later, you're back inside, sitting down to watch your usual show, except your body has already quietly gone to work, pulling some of that dinner's glucose out of your bloodstream before it ever had the chance to build up and linger through the night. That's really all this habit is. Nothing dramatic, nothing that requires new shoes or a gym membership. Just a small, deliberate shift in what happens between finishing your plate and sitting back down. Now let's talk about how to actually do this, because I want you walking away from this video with something you can start tonight, not just an interesting fact to file away. You do not need a strenuous workout for this to work. In fact, the research on post-meal walking has generally focused on gentle to moderate paced walks, often somewhere in the 10 to 20 minute range, and even shorter walks broken into a few minutes at a time throughout the evening have shown meaningful benefits. You don't need special equipment, you don't need a gym, and you don't need to work up a sweat. A relaxed walk around your neighborhood if the weather and your mobility allow for it, a few loops around your living room or hallway if you'd rather stay indoors, or even a slow lap or two around your backyard all count. The goal isn't intensity. It's simply getting your leg muscles moving and contracting steadily for a sustained stretch of time shortly after you've eaten. If walking outside isn't practical for you, whether because of weather, mobility limitations, or simply personal preference, there are still ways to get this benefit. Marching gently in place while watching the evening news, doing a few slow laps of your home, or even standing up and doing some light stretching and shifting your weight between your legs for several minutes can engage those same muscle groups. The exact form matters far less than the basic principle: get your legs moving, gently and steadily, sometime in that window after your evening meal. I do want to mention a few safety notes here, because I take this seriously and I want you doing this the smart way. If you're on insulin or certain diabetes medications that can lower your blood sugar, it's worth talking with your doctor about the timing and intensity of after-dinner activity, since combining medication with exercise can occasionally lower blood sugar more than expected, and you want to understand your own personal risk of that happening. If you have any balance concerns, neuropathy affecting your feet, or other mobility issues, stick to a well-lit, familiar, flat area, wear supportive shoes, and consider having someone nearby or using a cane or walker if that's already part of your routine. And as always, if you're starting any new physical activity habit and you have underlying heart or lung conditions, it's worth a quick conversation with your doctor first, just to make sure a gentle evening walk fits well within whatever activity guidelines they've already given you personally. None of this is meant to scare you away from trying it for the overwhelming majority of older adults. A slow, gentle walk after dinner is about as low risk an activity as exists. I just want you doing it safely and with your own doctor's blessing if you have any specific health concerns. Let's talk for a moment about consistency, because that's really the piece that determines whether this habit actually moves the needle for you over time. One walk after one dinner isn't going to transform your long-term blood sugar control, and I don't want to oversell this as some kind of miracle fix. But research on habits and blood sugar management consistently points to the same underlying truth. It's the small things done repeatedly, night after night, that compound into meaningful results over weeks and months. A gentle walk after dinner, done most nights of the week, becomes part of the rhythm of your evening, the same way brushing your teeth or taking your medication becomes automatic once it's built into your routine. Many people find it easier to stick with when they pair it with something they already enjoy: walking while listening to a podcast, walking with a spouse or a neighbor as a chance to catch up on the day, or walking the dog a little later than usual so the timing lines up with that post-meal window. The habit sticks best when it doesn't feel like a chore bolted onto your evening, but rather a natural, even enjoyable part of how your evening already unfolds. I also want to mention how this pairs with the other bedtime factors we talked about earlier in the video, because none of these habits work in isolation. If you take your evening walk, but then spend the next 2 hours scrolling on a bright phone screen right up until the moment you try to fall asleep, you're still working against the melatonin and sleep quality piece of this puzzle. If you take your walk, but then have a large glass of wine or a late, heavy snack right before bed, you're partially undoing the benefit you just built up. The walk is genuinely the single most impactful individual habit here, which is exactly why it earned the top spot in this video, but it works best as part of a broader evening routine that also includes dimming the lights, putting screens away a reasonable amount of time before bed, keeping your evening meal reasonably sized, and giving yourself a consistent, comfortable wind-down period before you actually try to fall asleep. Now, I want to address a few of the objections. I know some of you are already thinking, because I've heard these before and they're completely fair concerns. The first is weather. Not everyone lives somewhere with pleasant evening walking weather year-round, and that's exactly why the indoor version of this matters just as much as the outdoor one. A slow walk down your hallway and back, repeated for 10 or 15 minutes, engages the same muscles and produces the same basic benefit as a walk outside. Don't let a cold night or a rainy evening be the reason you skip this. The second objection is fatigue. A lot of people finish dinner feeling tired and simply want to sit down, and I understand that completely. What I gently push back on is the idea that you need to feel energized to do this. This isn't meant to be an energizing workout. It's meant to be a low-effort, almost restful kind of movement, and most people actually report feeling a little more relaxed afterward, not more worn out, because gentle walking tends to ease tension rather than add to it. The third objection is simply forgetting, or letting the routine slip after a few days. This is where pairing the walk with something you already do consistently helps enormously right after you clear the dinner table, right before you sit down for your evening show, right when you'd normally let the dog out. Attaching the new habit to an old one that's already automatic is one of the most reliable ways to make any new routine actually stick long term. I also want to be honest that this single habit isn't a replacement for your medication, your doctor's guidance, or the other pieces of your diabetes management plan. It's not going to erase years of blood sugar patterns overnight, and anyone who tells you a 10-minute walk is a cure for diabetes is overselling something that simply isn't true. What it is a genuinely well-supported, low-risk, zero-cost addition to whatever plan you're already following, one that specifically targets the overnight window that so much other advice completely ignores. Think of it as one more tool in the toolbox, not a replacement for the tools you're already using. I want to hear from you on this one, because I think this is one of those habits that's easy to talk about and a little harder to actually build. Drop a comment below and let me know, do you already take a walk after dinner, or is this something you're going to try starting tonight? And if you do try it, come back in a week or two and let me know in the comments whether you've noticed any difference in how you're feeling in the mornings. I genuinely read through these comments, and hearing real experiences from people actually trying this out is part of what shapes the next videos we make on this channel. If this video gave you something useful, something you're actually going to use tonight, do me a favor and hit that like button, because it helps this video reach other people over 60 who are dealing with the exact same frustrating morning blood sugar numbers you might have dealt with before watching this. And if you have a spouse, a parent, a sibling, or a friend who's been trying to get a handle on their blood sugar, consider sharing this video with them directly. This is the kind of simple, practical habit that's so much easier to stick with when you've got someone else doing it alongside you, checking in with you, and holding you a little bit accountable on the nights when the couch feels a lot more appealing than a walk around the block. Before you go, I want to leave you with one last thought. So much of the advice out there about diabetes and blood sugar management can feel overwhelming. Endless lists of foods to avoid, medications to track, numbers to monitor. And in the middle of all of that, it's easy to overlook something as simple as a 10-minute walk after dinner, precisely because it seems too small to matter. But the science behind why this works is solid. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it fits into an evening you're already living through anyway. Sometimes the most powerful habits aren't the complicated ones. They're the quiet, consistent ones that nobody talks about, tucked away in the part of your day you weren't paying attention to. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're building out a whole series here on Prime Health Insight, specifically for adults over 60 who want clear, honest, practical answers about food, blood sugar, sleep, and healthy aging. We've got more videos like this one coming soon, and I don't want you to miss them. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. Try that after dinner walk tonight if you haven't already. Let me know how it goes down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.